I want you just for a second to just close your eyes, take a deep breath, and I want you to remove every thought or belief or idea that you have had about communism. Because we are going to break communism down a little bit. And, shout out to Professor Richard Wolff for doing this. At the very beginning of the video, he mentions that people have been asking him to do this, to discuss it. So he took that leap. And there may be some things that he talks about in reference to communism that may be new to you, or maybe you have not heard this before. And one of the things that he tackles right off the bat is, where exactly did the term communism come from? And I think this is important for people to hear. In this country, we have been taught to see it as such a negative aspect, right? This is not something that should be celebrated. That's what we've been taught. This goes all the way back to McCarthyism, right? But is that necessarily true? Let's go ahead and get into that discussion. Now, this is a part of Richard Wolff's economic update. You guys know we do a segment on this once a week. And the title of this video is called, What is Communism? So let's go ahead and get into that.
I'm going to try to give you an overview of what the word, the concept, and the social movement called communism is all about. And it may be different, probably will be, from what you might have thought that word means. So let's begin at the very beginning. What is communism? Mostly, for most of human history that this word and this idea have circulated, I think it's fair to say it has been a utopian dream, an ideal, a notion that the human community, and notice please the same root, commune, community, communism.
Community. And Gene hit the nail on the head, community. Now, why would community be a bad thing? Why would the government want to paint the idea of community as a bad thing? Well, I'm sitting back here and I'm thinking about the way that our government operates. And it's all coming to me. When do they really push for us to establish community? When? Because most of the time, especially during election season, they are actually telling us to be divisive. They're telling us to go against another side. Republicans are telling us to go against the Democrats. Democrats are telling us to go against the Republicans. This is the reason why some people like me are independents. So the idea of community, part of that includes coming together with people. And if you're trying to create community, not everyone in the community is going to have the same political ideology as you. That's why they don't push that. The Black Panthers realize that. The Black Panthers realize that it is in your community where you are going to get that support and help that you need. Whether it's the breakfast program, the lunch program, whether it's free clinics, those were things that were done within the community. It was not done through the federal government because they realized that the federal government was not going to help out the people in the community. And yet, for all these years, they have taught us that this is such a bad word, that we should be afraid of it, that we should be ashamed.
The human community could function in a mutually respectful, mutually honest, mutually nurturant way as an idealized community in which what everybody contributed was what they knew best, loved to do, felt passionate about, and where everyone received from the community, both physical and material, but also spiritual.
Everyone received from the community. This is why I say an organization like the Black Panthers had the right idea. And some people don't realize that the Black Panthers were not just a local group. It wasn't just American chapters. It was an international organization. There were Black Panther organizations in South Korea, you guys. So this was something that was spreading. And the one thing that the government did not want the American people to do was to come together, regardless of political ideologies, regardless of race. They didn't want working class and poor people to come together, because then they start to realize, hey, maybe we should be fighting against the 1%. Maybe we should be fighting against the oligarchs. Maybe this idea of going and voting for someone is really not going to help us. So let's just screw all that and let's see what we can get done with each other. They didn't want that.
Community, in which what everybody contributed was what they knew best, loved to do, felt passionate about, and where everyone received from the community, both physical and material, but also spiritual benefits, consumables, means of both a physical and mental life. Communism was a generic idea that this sort of community would be valuable in terms of where you live, valuable in terms of where you work, and valuable as a way to link up with other people, no matter what the particular activities you engaged in, which is why communistic communities, in this sense, have long existed for thousands of years.
Notice he said, regardless of the political ideology that you engage in.
I'm going to give you just a few examples. I remember once traveling through France and noticing as I entered a village that it used to be called, and many of them still are called, communes. It's partly a description of their setup as a community, but partly a harking back to a notion of this mutually supportive ideal, this utopian ideal. You might also be struck to learn that in many religions, there are specific rules and commitments to that kind of interaction that you could call communism. People interested in communism have noticed that, for example, medieval Catholic monks, orders of nuns, and all kinds of spiritually engaged people organized their communities where they lived and where they worked in this mutually supportive way. Perhaps the most famous document about it is called, fittingly, the Communist Manifesto.
Yep.
Written and published in 1848, that's a little over 150 years ago, by Marx and Engels. It talked a lot about what was wrong with society at that time, which they identified with capitalism, and what it was that they, as critics of capitalism, pointed to as an alternative that others who are either critics or victims of capitalism would be well advised to think about and to pursue.
And this is something I want to say here for a second. When you start critiquing capitalism, people see you as a threat. Let's think about it, right? Because if you're thinking about the oligarchs, you're thinking about the billionaires, they love capitalism. They don't want to embrace socialism or Marxism or communism. They don't want to embrace any of that. They love capitalism because it gives them that reign over the free market, and it allows them to earn a lot of money by exploiting the people that work below them. So when you start coming out and saying that capitalism is bad, I'm against capitalism, those people, and I say those people because they're the ones that actually control the government, corporations control the government, those people, it is a red flag for them. So they send these messages to the government and say, you need to go after these individuals. In fact, tomorrow, a big special guest will be on here with me tomorrow night who actually has had that happen recently. They don't want you to educate the masses about how dangerous capitalism really is and how we've been brainwashed and conditioned to think that it's really working for us. Or if we just work hard enough, work a couple more hours each week, pick up another shift here, pick up another shift there, that we will actually get the American dream. And there are people who will spend their whole lives trying to do this. People will be 70 years old, still trying to obtain the American dream, to the point where they won't even retire at 70 years old. And I've seen it. And it should never take that long. It only takes that long because it is not obtainable for everyone. And that's the problem with capitalism. It doesn't benefit everyone. It benefits a certain select few, and the rest of us, a lot of times, are just trying to get by. That's the problem.
Their idea was quite simple, that this is something that has been around and will come back over and over again. Indeed, they opened the Communist Manifesto with that famous line about communism is like a ghost haunting modern society, with the image constantly of how things could be different and how things could be better. And I'm going to end today's program, as I'll show you, by suggesting to you that worker cooperatives in the workplace are an attempt to bring that ghost right back to life right now.
Where is Roger Meadows when you need him? Did you hear what he just said about worker co-ops? And this is something that I've been telling people. Look, trying to create a union, that's good. Trying to unionize, that's good. Joining a union, that's good. That's giving you some benefits, some rights, right? But worker co-ops are actually better than unions. And I think we need to start talking more about that and focusing more on that than unionizing. When you join a union, you still don't own any piece of the company that you're working for. Yeah, they'll give you extra benefits here. Maybe part of that union agreement may be that you get a 3 or 4% raise every year regardless, right? That could be part of it. Maybe it means that you're guaranteed vacation that you weren't guaranteed before. That could be part of it. But I want you to understand that's the minimal. Those are things that we should have in this country already anyway. You shouldn't have to fight to have vacation. You shouldn't have to fight to have paid maternity leave. You shouldn't have to fight to have health care. You really, these are basic necessities that we should already have. And we have been convinced in the United States, because this is an individual country. Here, it's all about the individual. It's all about individualism. What can you do for yourself? Not what can you do for your community? So we've been conditioned and programmed since grade school that we're supposed to fight for things if we want more. That these things that I just mentioned to you are not just supposed to be given to us, but they really should just be given to us. So if that's the case, instead of going towards unions, the ultimate dream should be worker cooperatives, because then you own a piece of the company. Professor Wolff talks a lot about worker co-ops on his channel, Democracy at Work. I highly recommend that you follow that channel. We have worker co-ops in this country. They don't get a lot of press. I wonder why. They don't get as much attention as unionizing efforts do, because you get more through a worker co-op. They don't want that to really get out like that. I wish we would focus more on that. I would love to see more co-ops in this country so that you can own a piece of, we don't own anything. You're working for this company. You just created a union. That's good. But they still own you. It's almost like a modern day version of slavery, just with some money. Just a little bit of money added in. So it's something to think about. Are the things that we are fighting for, are these things that are difficult to get, that we should have to strive to get in this country? Or are these policies and benefits that we should already be given from birth? Something to think about.
Okay, even after the Communist Manifesto in the middle of the 19th century, for the rest of that century, what we had was a slow growth of those ideas, but not mostly under the word communism. That word faded and was replaced by the term socialism. Socialism became the great alternative to capitalism across the second half of the 19th century, around Europe, here in the United States, and pretty much globally as it spread. But it was always the notion of something fundamentally different from capitalism in ways that ought to make it more attractive, at least in the minds of those who were so persuaded. World War I changed everything. Indeed, the 50 years up to and into World War I were years of growing, horrible conflict. Most of that conflict was between European countries and the colonies that they either already had from an earlier time or acquired in the 18th and 19th century. The Russians competed against the British to shape colonies, the French against the Germans, the Belgians against the Americans. There were endless wars, small and large, throughout what we now call Asia, Africa, Latin America, and so on. And then it all came to a head when the final war, World War I, thought to be final at the time, because it was the worst war human society had ever seen, killed 20 million people, half military, half civilian. But it came after colonial wars that killed many millions more, including here in the United States, where the 18th and 19th century were literally continuous warfare between the Europeans who arrived here and the native people who were systematically destroyed. Anything as cataclysmic as a world war, let alone one that comes after wars that killed many millions more, shook everything. Modern society has never overcome the scars of World War I. And one of the things that happened was to shake socialism. It had grown dramatically from the middle of the 19th century up until World War I, but World War I split modern socialism into two groups.
And this is what is happening now. It's starting to come back again, and it's growing again. I did tell you guys this, I think a couple of months ago. The students that I worked with were Gen Z students, and they are more likely to embrace socialism. And you have to ask yourself why. And this is why someone like a Bernie Sanders, even though he calls himself a democratic socialist, whatever, even someone like him, this is why the establishment saw him as such a dangerous option, right? Because he was reaching a lot of people, and especially a lot of younger people who were kind of waking up to this, like, hey, maybe we should have all these things that he says that we should have. Now, I have other criticisms of Bernie Sanders. I'm going to get into that in a minute with the next story. But it started to spread. That message started to spread. So more people starting to ask, maybe we should have these things. Why do we not have them? Yes, the US government does give more money to the military industrial complex. Why are they not giving that money more to us, to the American people? If they took the military budget and they cut that military budget, maybe we could have health care for everyone in this country. So yes, it is happening again. And this is what they fear. This is why they're trying to silence voices like that. Pay close attention. It's coming again. It's coming around again, right? And this is coming to the younger people who pretty much they're going to be politically, they're going to be the ones who are going to be in power in what, the next 15, 20 years, right? Politically, they're the ones. So they see that as a big threat. And I think just pay attention. Just pay attention to what's happening. There's a reason why they're trying to silence certain people.
One group ended up keeping the name. We are critics of capitalism. We want to do better. And we call ourselves socialists. But another group was critical of this first group, and they said, you're not doing enough, you're not going far enough, you haven't come up with a really worked out answer. We're determined to go further, and we're going to call ourselves something else.
Here we go.
We're going to call ourselves communists. That's when the term takes on a whole new meaning. Because what happened in almost all of the countries where there was a socialist party was that that party split into a socialist party and into a new communist party. And all the socialists had to pick sides. Which way you're going to go? With the socialists or with the communists? One of the key issues, not the only one, but one of the key issues had to do with World War I. The socialists were those who decided they had to go with their own country. They had to go to war, World War I, fight the war as German socialists or British socialists or American socialists. And that would put them against, of course, socialists in other countries who were soldiers or affected civilians. But others said, no, this is not a war that we as socialists should fight.
What?
Because it's a war that's the product of capitalism. It's a war among countries dominated by capitalists. It's the fruit of their endless quest to make money by controlling all the rest of the planet in the
It is a war dominated by capitalism. And we see this happening today with all of them. What is it over? Oil, right? Usually it's over oil.
colonial territories they warred over for much of the 19th century. We don't want to be part of it. And the interesting thing was those who refused to be partisan in the war included both the head of the Socialist Party in the United States, Eugene Victor Debs, and the head of the equivalent party in Russia, Lenin. Both of them said, this is not our war, we are not going to fight in it, and urged Russians not to take up arms against working class people in other countries.
That is important for you to know. This is why I like for you to hear a little bit of history, because given that context that he just gave you about what they decided to do in Russia, how they said, we're not going to participate, we're not going to go to war against working class people. Does that help you understand why governments like the US government over the past couple of decades have demonized Russia? Let's hear that from Professor Wolff again. Everyone, take note to this. I should timestamp this, huh? Let's see when this starts.
As German socialists or British socialists or American socialists. And that would put them against, of course, socialists in other countries who were soldiers or affected civilians. But others said, no, this is not a war.
Timestamp 9:58 if you want to refer back to this, if you watch the entire video from Richard Wolff.
That we as socialists should fight, because it's a war that's the product of capitalism. It's a war among countries dominated by capitalists. It's the fruit of their endless quest to make money by controlling all the rest of the planet in the colonial territories they warred over for much of the 19th century. We don't want to be part of it. And the interesting thing was those who refused to be partisan in the war included both the head of the Socialist Party in the United States, Eugene Victor Debs, and the head of the equivalent party in Russia, Lenin. Both of them said, this is not our war, we are not going to fight in it, and urged Russians not to take up arms against working class people in other countries.
Not to take up arms against working class people in other countries. Well, well, well. That says a lot.
as Mr. Debs did. Lenin was exiled, Debs was jailed for taking such a position. But
see what they did? What did they do? They exiled one, they jailed the other. See? Again, what was addressed? Working class people.
it began to make very clear what some of the differences were between socialists and communists. Then there was the revolution in Russia, where, under the leadership of the same Lenin,
we have 716 people watching. Let's go ahead and hit that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. Sorry, I'm trying to channel my inner CJ here and remember to do that.
for the first time, socialists came to power. And the question was, what were they? Which kind of socialists? But Lenin, by having taken his position against the war, could not and would not go back to the old socialism, so they became the Communist Party.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. A little bit of history lesson for you. And they're still trying to silence anti-war voices today. I'm not going to play the entire video. I think you should definitely go watch the entire video. Again, the name of this video is called, it's Richard Wolff's Economic Update. It's on Democracy at Work. And the title is called, What is Communism? Again, pass this on to your friends, family members, encourage them to watch the full video. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, huh? It's good to know about history. It's good to know about history because sometimes it can help explain why people have the views that they have today and why the government operates the way that it does today. So I thought that that was important for people to hear. I know some of you watching are probably like, oh God, no, not the communists, not the C word. But just because you may be against something or opposed to something doesn't mean that we can't at least talk about it, right? And I think it was important for people to hear that. Professor Wolff always coming through. Very, very valuable history lesson. Does that change your opinion? If you were against it, does that change your opinion a little bit or your perception a little bit about communism?